Everyone, it's Ryu1940. Today we're on Enigma's Cold War server in a Huey running 3 sorties to take a look at the new helicopter changes that came in the latest server update. Let's get started. This update was originally slated for December 18th. I did however see it was released before that, and this was filmed on or around December 15th. I was very happy to see it was out early, and I think it's an excellent move forward on an already fun server. If you haven't tried Enigma's Cold War server, I highly recommend it. The plane set and the weapons are tailored for the era. So far it's proven to be pretty popular, and I regularly see the server near max capacity, which makes it fun for everyone. The first thing we're going to see in practice here that was added for helicopters in this patch is the ability for troop insertions. The Huey contains 10 seats. Squads of infantry count as 4 seats. That allows the Huey to transport 2 squads and have 2 additional seats left over to pick up downed pilots. We'll see that later on in the next sortie. If you place a squad in an enemy sector, after a minute it will kill 2 random enemy units. Squads automatically dismount, so in the Huey you'll see 8 guys on the ground a few seconds after touchdown. 2 squads equals 4 enemy ground units destroyed within the minute. For those that fly other helicopters, you'll find the seat numbers may vary. The Hip and the Huey both have 10 seats, the Hind has 4 seats, and the Gazelle has 3. The seat numbers have been set for balancing reasons because helicopters like the Hind, for instance, can drop a squad, kill 2 enemy units with that squad, and very easily go on to kill multiple ground units via their air-to-ground missiles. I'm not sure if you're able to catch it in the audio, but I was planning on setting down before the tree line that we just hopped over, and I heard a high caliber rifle round pass close by. For me, that was a no-brainer to fly into the clearing that was fully protected and enclosed. And after dropping off the troops, we get to hunting with our dual 2.75-inch rocket pods. It's not long before I come across 2 fortifications, and luckily the armored ground units near it appear to be destroyed. It's definitely challenging to fly the Huey offensively on this server as you're outgunned by mostly everything, and it's not surprising because it's a utility helicopter after all. I can't imagine how much fun it would be if you were able to take an older model Cobra out for a spin on this server. Now, I'm not that great with rocket attacks in the Huey, but ultimately we do destroy, I think, one of the fortifications. I actually don't get any indication of it until we land at the FARP. And what's cool about the server is there's a whole ecosystem of aircraft, so you'll see one of the friendly F5s come by and cover me, as it does get pretty dangerous on the front lines. The MiGs and other aircraft like to SWAT helicopters at low altitude. Here we make it to friendly lines, and I finally remember to ditch my spent rocket pods to save on the weight. I've also found, because the air threat is so great at low altitudes, it's best to kind of just hop along tree lines and deny any sort of open shot for aircraft. If you notice that you're being chased by a MiG or something like that, it's probably best to maneuver around tree lines and buildings to block any sort of flat trajectory gunshot. So on the server, it has FARPs that actually move with the front lines, and you'll have to check the map to verify where you can spawn in at. If you spawn in at one that's not active, you'll be kicked for 30 seconds after you spawn in and go right back to the main lobby, and then you can select your role again. I didn't realize that the FARP I'm landing at is not active, and the active one was actually just a mile or 2 away from this one. This is important because if you land at one of these empty FARPs, you're not going to be able to reload, refuel, or rearm or anything like that. So ultimately I shut this helicopter down and we respawn at the active for the next sortie. This sortie, my main objective started off as getting troops to the front line. However, I cruise around with the CSAR homing frequency on just in case, and for the blue side that's 31.05 FM, and for the red side it's 121.50 AM. This is my favorite thing to do in DCS, combat, search, and rescue. I've loved it on the Through the Inferno server, and I love it here. If you follow this channel, you probably remember the Mountain CSAR video I made on Through the Inferno. And I'm so glad that this helicopter update brings a truly dynamic CSAR experience. On Through the Inferno, one of its limitations was the missions cycle through, so what is active and makes pilots get shot down can be inactive by the time you get to the area, so it's not really fun. But on this server, it's really dynamic because when players get shot down, you're able to recover them, and that usually happens in a dangerous area that has very hostile airspace, and recovering them actually impacts how the front can move and goes into a calculation of attrition. So this makes things pretty consequential, and it's sort of decisions that you make on the fly. Like, you know, I was flying to the front to drop off troops, and I just so happened to find that there was a pilot down near me, and I was able to pick him up. So because this happened pretty close to the FARP, I just opt to recover the pilot, fly back to the FARP to return them, and then relaunch to the front for another attempt at a troop deployment. Alright, since we're flying around the FARP right now, let me just take a moment to discuss the things that you should do when you're flying near a FARP. So on servers like this one, the airspace gets pretty congested because everyone is coming and going from one location. And it's important to keep your head on a swivel and look around. And it's also important to anticipate the needs of the other helicopters and the airspace that probably should be cleared for them, because some of them, when they take off heavy, are going to require some forward movement to get the translational lift pretty immediately, depending on their weight. So on this server in particular, it's not necessary to land directly on a pad for you to, you know, rearm, refuel, get new troops, or drop troops off. So you can land in the grass next to the pad, and what that does is it makes it safe for new pilots to spawn into the game world and not spawn in on top of you, because there's no check for that. If you're on the pad and it's a pad that you didn't spawn in at, and somebody spawns in on that pad, both of you are going to explode. So you don't want to destroy two aircraft for no good reason. So simply, if you're already in the game world, just land next to the pad, and it's good enough for recovery or refueling or rearming and things like that. On this next run, we're going to come across an enemy Mi-8 who's actually trying to pick up one of our downed pilots, and then we'll also capture an enemy pilot, and we'll drop our squads off in the frontline area. And after all that, we'll head back home and call it a night before the server restarts. So let's see how that plays out. When this played out live, I noticed blue smoke on the horizon, and my eyes instantly visually homed in on that. As I looked off in the distance, I did notice a helicopter was near it, and then much to my surprise, it was an enemy helicopter, an Mi-8. And the way it works on this server is that any helicopter that comes near a pilot, the pilots will do two things. At 4 kilometers, they will fire a single flare, and then at 2 kilometers, they will pop smoke, and the smoke lasts for 5 minutes. The difference between a friendly or enemy downed pilot is that enemy pilots don't broadcast homing beacons you can use. You can still pick them up, you just won't be able to radio guide to them. So I was actually surprised that that mechanic was there, because I just assumed a friendly pilot wouldn't pop smoke or any other visual cue for an enemy aircraft to come, you know, recover them. This little engagement was nuts. Like I said before, I'm not great at rocket aiming in the Huey by no means, but I thought that I had this hip dead to rights. I purposely circled to the right to allow myself in the right seat to have a better view of the damage on the ground. And again, with the surprises, I could not believe that the hip survived that. I popped off a few rockets while I was in the air, which miss, and then my gunners lay some hate with their miniguns, and they connect, but they don't seem to do much. So the hip very smartly begins to run away, and I know that the Huey isn't as fast as the hip, so I know I'm not going to chase it down, but I end up running after it anyways, because I had to go to the front lines on the enemy side to drop off troops, and I would just see, hopefully, maybe get lucky, and this guy would maneuver back towards me and I can try and finish him off. I'm giving chase to this hip, and I see blue smoke further in front of me. The hip actually flies past it and begins to circle back. I briefly equate in my head that blue smoke is good, and it doesn't register the danger that the hip is actually turning back towards me because it's over its own red ground forces. The incoming tracers from various calibers quickly register, however, that I need to break away and run towards my lines. By now I've observed the hip popping flares, and in my mind that could only mean that it's communicating with some air cover and trying to establish visual cues for fighters to come in and provide support. It's time for me to run. And it's not long before we get back to our own lines and we find some red smoke that I cue in on. And I still have troops on board, but I've got 2 extra seats because it's the Huey, and we've got 10 seats total, so I figure we can snag this guy, then circle back again to the enemy lines and get our infantry inserted, and then call it a day. I have to say, because there's so much going on in this server with all the various aircraft types, that it's pretty nerve-wracking to try to recover somebody around smoke. In a Huey, you're no means like the top dog or apex predator. You know, there's fighter aircraft, ground attack aircraft, enemy hinds that could easily wipe you out. And in DCS, there's like no better beacon than bright red or blue smoke that says, "Look here," to all the different players in the vicinity. And it really puts pressure on you to get in and out quickly. And I find it more dangerous than regular troop insertion because at least when you're doing that, nobody has any idea of where you're going, so they can't cue in on anything and anticipate what you're going to do. But when people see smoke, they tend to look and investigate. But luckily we get it done and safely depart the area, and we head on back over to the enemy side to drop off our troops. As we did before, if you could swing it up to land in a clearing that's surrounded by trees and buildings, this should shroud you from ground forces, and it should also make it a little harder for low-flying aircraft to see you. If you land out in the open, it's pretty obvious at, you know, lower angles that there's a helicopter landing. They'll see all the smoke and everything. If you do it in a clearing that's surrounded by trees and stuff, hopefully it could mask some angles of low-flying aircraft being able to detect you. Usually after I drop off troops, I try to find hardened structures to attack with my rocket loadout, but because we used all of them with that elusive MI-8, it's now time for us to return back to the FARP. So, should you be flying on this server? I mean, if you like helicopter flying, it's different, but it's fun because it's different. You know, a lot of times servers have helicopters relegated to building air defense networks, and they're just sling loading equipment around to places, and you don't do any of that in this. There's nothing like, you're not placing ground forces that can maneuver or anything like that. You're just dropping off troops, and that is affecting how the front line gets calculated and moves forward or backwards. Now, for fixed wing, I know some people don't like it because the Cold War stuff is not like advanced sensor management, which some people like in modern aircraft. But if you can stomach it, it's pretty fun. And, you know, I'm also looking forward to seeing in the future when we get other Cold War aircraft online, like the Mirage F1, the A7 that's in development, the F8. Everyone's hoping for an F4 one day. Hopefully we see that. And then Razbam, I think, has a MiG-23 in some stage of development. So, yeah, there's a lot of room to grow on this server, and you should absolutely try it out. This is probably going to be my last video of the year, and I want to take a moment to thank all of you guys for watching. Thank you for subscribing if you've subscribed. I love engaging with you guys in the comments, so and I want to say, if you ever see me on this server or any other servers, just say hi. It'd be fun to like fly with you, and it's pretty cool to meet people that have seen some of my videos. I was you know, I was gone from home for half of the year basically, so it's nice to be home for the holidays. And with that, I hope you all have a happy holidays and Merry Christmas if that's what you celebrate, and Happy New Year. And I hope 2022 is very prosperous for all of you. Take care, and I'll see you on the other side.